I want to ask you about something else that the architect of the president's immigration policy, Stephen Miller, said. On Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America? How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany. And, you know, as we know, there have been many immigrants who've tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then.
We have found so far, we believe that the Somali fraud operation in Minnesota is the single greatest theft of taxpayer dollars through welfare fraud in American history. We believe that we have only scratched the very top of the surface of how deep this goes. And you're familiar with all the scams with pretending that children have autism who are not in fact autistic, with pretending to enroll people in food programs when in fact nobody was ever enrolled, and engaging in massive fraud, lying, and theft and grift on a scale we've never seen before in American history. The total bill, the total tab for this is going to be far beyond the numbers we've already seen reported. We believe the state government is fully complicit in this scheme, and we believe that what we are going to uncover is going to shock the American people. Look, based on the records that we already have, and this is a significant undercount, by the way, 75% of the Somali population in Minnesota is on welfare. But that's likely a significant undercount of just how much of a financial burden the Somali refugee population is imposing on this country.
Joining us now is our panel, writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue and Signal principal and pollster Nick Weinstein. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with Donald Trump. He's blasted Ilhan Omar and her friends. Let's take a listen to him.
You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other. And we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
Esther, now this comes after the revelations of the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota, mostly involving people from the Somalia community. Now, Donald Trump is, of course, getting criticism for his language. The media's in meltdown over his comments, but we know garbage is a word we've heard before from Joe Biden. He used that just last year. Esther, what do you make of President Trump there?
Now, of course, President Trump has a very unique way of expressing himself, probably the most unpresidential you've ever seen. But of course, you know, Joe Biden used similar language last year. So I think if you're going to, you know, feign moral outrage over this, you kind of have to be even-handed in this. And look, I think Trump has his advantage of the fact that we know who he is, we know how he speaks. The media having a meltdown over something Donald Trump has said before is old news. So it doesn't really sting in the same way that you would think. But on the point of to be quite critical of, you know, to examine critically what he was saying, the Somali community in America is quite unique in the sense that you have over, I believe, 200,000 that have mainly come since the 1990s, following the civil war in Somalia, that are kind of a unique immigrant group in the U.S. in the sense that their economic activity is relatively low. They overwhelmingly claim state handouts and benefits. And this, you know, scandal in Minnesota, this fraud scandal, involved over $1 billion that was funneled to fake organizations, and that money found its way to Al-Shabaab, which is literally an Islamist terrorist group in Somalia. These individuals used, you know, fake children and fake autistic children in particular to claim all sorts of, you know, financial benefits from the state of Minnesota. And it happened on Tim Walz's watch. And I'm pretty sure there are many people now that are thanking the Lord that this man didn't manage to become the vice president of the United States. So, you know, trying to just look past the usual outrage over what Donald Trump said, there is actually merit to what he said. He didn't, you know, there are many immigrant groups in the US, like, you know, Chinese Americans, like Nigerian Americans, who in terms of scholastic attainment, in terms of income, in terms of actual work ethic, in terms of how much they claim from benefits, is a lot lower than the Somali community. And that's not racist to point out. The kind of people you absorb into your country dictate what kind of country you want, not just now, but in the future as well. Because these people end up having kids, their culture or their inability to assimilate also affects the broader mainstream culture. So I think it's important to look at what Donald Trump said critically. And instead of, you know, picking at what he's saying and feigning moral outrage, look at actually the fraud cases that have happened with this community and asking why so many of them seem to be happy not working and claiming state handouts.
Nick, I want to get your thoughts on that as well. And of course, the media goes after what Donald Trump says, even when the media covered the fraud scandal in Minnesota, they were again focusing on what Donald Trump said about Tim Walz as opposed to what actually happened under Tim Walz's watch, which is, of course, more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money was not going where it's supposed to. It was going to funding lavish lifestyles, going overseas, going to potentially going to a Somali terrorist organization. Can I get your reaction?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Esther said. I mean, this is a massive fraud that's been perpetrated. And I think, you know, part of the frustration from everyday Americans is that, you know, everyday Americans are told, you know, do things right, work hard, and, you know, the government will be there as a backstop if things get bad. They're not taking advantage of these type of government handouts. And when you see this massive fraud being perpetrated, you know, that's taking money that's intended for, you know, in one case, I think it was $300 million. It was intended for children suffering from autism. You know, it's taking money out of the hands of folks that actually need it. And especially in light of the awful attack involving another refugee from a Muslim community here in Washington, D.C., I think it's not surprising that, you know, there's renewed focus on enforcing our immigration laws and scrutinizing some of these more insular communities, particularly given the ties to terrorism that have been reported with some of this money being sent back to Somalia and going to Al-Shabaab, you know, an Al-Qaeda affiliated terror group.